Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. The budget that the President has presented seeks to add some improvements in our fiscal operations, both through revenue and spending changes. And as important as those spending cuts are, some of them even painful cuts in spending, the revenue is also very important. In fact, it's the principal job of this committee. You don't believe that we can achieve a balanced budget without some additional revenues, do you?
No, I don't. I don't think you can achieve the necessary reduction in deficits that are critical to long-term growth without looking at sensible, carefully designed tax reforms as well.
Right. And with reference to those tax reforms, one that you have been involved in of late is corporate tax reform. We recently, as you know, had a hearing in this committee on this. According to a Bush administration Treasury report, taxes on U.S. corporations represent a smaller percent of their profits, in fact, than in other developed countries across the OECD. I believe that last year there was a report out that corporate tax receipts represent a little over 7% of federal tax revenues. 50 years ago, it was about 3 times that amount that we got. President Reagan, which I think provides us some guidance here, when he approved the 1986 Tax Reform Act, he actually raised corporate tax revenues for the federal Treasury by about $122 billion. You have said that the guiding principle here, and the President has said in the State of the Union, is that at a minimum we should not borrow money or shift more of the tax burden to individuals in order to have corporate tax reform. And I want to assure that that is a firm and unyielding position of the administration, that we will not be borrowing from the Chinese to finance such reform, and we will not be shifting more of the burden to individuals.
That's right. When we say revenue neutral, we mean we would not support tax reforms that reduce revenues from the corporate sector, but it also means that we don't think it's realistic or achievable or desirable to try to raise revenues from higher taxes on businesses, because we live in a much more competitive world. And though, as what you said is right, the average effective tax rate on U.S. business today is about the average of our competitors, but our statutory rates are much higher, their statutory rates are much lower, and that creates a playing field that works to our disadvantage. And we don't think realistically we can shift more of the burden to the business community than they already bear because of that new competitive world. So when we say revenue neutral, we mean revenue neutral.
You're not going to have them contribute
less than
7%.
And not going to try to go materially higher.
You've included in this budget proposal, again, international tax loophole closures that you've had in the past. And one of those that I've been particularly interested in is the one that deals with corporations that develop intellectual property, patents, various other forms of intellectual property, formulas and the like here in the United States, perhaps even using our research credits, and then just before they're to be marketed, they shift the ownership or they joint venture it offshore. We had testimony on this last year at our hearing from Assistant Secretary Shea, who said that the administration would support moving forward to deal with this narrow but very costly problem that I believe your budget that you've just submitted says cost us about $20 billion over 10. And my question to you is, does the administration continue to support dealing with this serious problem of shifting intellectual property overseas as a separate independent matter from broader reform we hope to eventually achieve?
We do. We can do it in 2 different ways. We can do it by reforming the current system as we proposed to reduce the opportunity our tax code provides to shift income outside the United States, income from intangibles like you suggested, or we can do it through comprehensive reform. But again, the overriding objective should be to make sure that we're reducing both the incentives and the opportunities in the tax system to shift income and investment outside the United States.
And I believe there are proposals not unlike the one Mr. Becerra talked about for Social Security in this continuing resolution to make significant cuts to Internal Revenue Service tax enforcement. I know some people who would like to see that amount cut to zero, but we've had testimony in the past that for every dollar that we cut in tax enforcement, we are reducing revenues by $3 to $14. Does that remain true, that significant cuts to the enforcement will actually worsen our budget deficit problems?
Absolutely. The independent analysts that look at this say for every dollar you put in IRS resources, customer service enforcement, you raise at least $4.